On this special bonus edition of the Pie Bomb Wrestling Podcast, we take a deep dive into what's happened over the last several weeks on the main roster in WWE, including a recap of the Hell in a Cell pay-per-view. It's all coming up on part 2 of Chris's vacation recovery here on the Pie Bomb Wrestling Podcast. The bomb drops now. Hello and welcome to this very special Friday edition, a bonus episode of the Pie Bomb Wrestling Podcast, the show that is for the fans, by the fans. I am your phenomenal host, Mr. Podcasting, Chris Belcher. You can follow me on social media at Chris Belcher 24. It's there on your screen if you're watching on YouTube. Make sure you leave us a comment. Make sure you subscribe. That way you get a notification every time that a new episode drops, which is on Mondays and Thursdays. If you're listening to us on a traditional audio format, whether that's on Spotify, Google Play, Apple Podcast, Anchor, or anywhere in between, thank you very much for doing that. Leave us that 5-star review. That really helps the show. And subscribe there as well. That way a new episode comes to the device of your choice every Monday and every Thursday. Again, the show is at PBW Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Make sure you subscribe anywhere and everywhere so that you get the latest news on the Pie Bomb Wrestling Podcast. Again, I am your host, Chris Belcher, and with me for a second time this week, you heard him yesterday on the Thursday edition of the show. You're going to hear him again today on the Friday edition. That is my CCW commentating partner making his second appearance on the Pie Bomb Wrestling Podcast. That is Mr. Tyler Peters. Tyler, how are you, man?
I am doing fantastic, Chris, and it's always a pleasure, my friend, my broadcast colleague. I mean, right here is the man, and we just had a blast calling CCW.
We did, man, and if our fans want to see and hear what a blast we had, make sure you check out CCW's YouTube channel, Coastal Championship Wrestling. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. A new match from Lucha Mania 2 where we broadcasted just released last week. We mentioned it yesterday. We'll mention it again. It's Chase Stevens and Fable Jake, one of our favorite matches from that show. Make sure you go check it out. Make sure you check out CCW Alive Wrestling episode 38. That features 2 matches from Lucha Mania 2 in Nashville, Tennessee, where we were on the call, and it was our first time, but it was a good time, man. We had a blast. It took us, we got comfortable pretty quick because we had to. That first match was insane. It was good to get all the adrenaline out on that first match. And then, man, it was a great experience. I had a blast. You
said it was adrenaline, man. The crowds in Nashville are great. I mean, Nashville has been such a historic wrestling town. You know this too, Chris. And it was just a wonderful experience, and happy to share it with you, my friend.
Absolutely. And happy that you have jumped on the Pie Bomb Wrestling Podcast once again so that we can cover all things main roster WWE. Typically, we hit you with Beyond the Federation right up top of the podcast, where we talk a little AEW and some stuff outside of. Guys, again, as you heard in the intro, I was on vacation last week. That's why there were no new episodes of the podcast. I was on vacation, so I barely had time to catch up on WWE and NXT, much less AEW. So for all you AEW fans, sorry, not going to cover it this week. We'll catch you next week. All right. So let's kick it off with the Hell in a Cell pay-per-view. Can I just say to my commentary partner, Mr. Tyler Peters, that I am a huge, huge, huge fan of Pat McAfee and his commentary. I don't know about you, but coming from a guy who was in the sports world, who is one of the most successful NFL punters in history, but did not broadcast any games afterwards. He went straight and did a radio show and those kind of things. Yeah, he is a natural at the microphone, and he fits right in to the wrestling business in this crazy sports entertainment world.
Oh, I think he's a natural. He's tremendous. I enjoyed it. I am a big fan of Pat McAfee. He's got the personality. I think he's settling in. We just talked about our experience. in WWE with Michael Cole on SmackDown and his work with NXT, taking on Adam Cole in that match. Then the War Games match. Pat McAfee not only dominates the sports world, he dominates sports entertainment, pro wrestling.
He does. 100%. I honestly, like, he was one of those guys that had an outstanding performance in the ring, and I'm actually excited for him to get back in the ring at some point. I'd like to see him do something else. I tell you, I think I brought this up when he first started on commentary, and that was on the show not long ago, right after WrestleMania, but I'll bring it up again to you. I think if he's not going to wrestle Adam Cole again, I think a great guy for him to wrestle would be Seth Rollins. I think that would be fun.
That would be a great match. I mean, Seth's that worker like Cole, and with Pat McAfee getting trained by the legendary Rip Rogers, from what I believe. I mean, You don't get much better than Rip Rogers. All those OVW standouts were trained down there with Cornette and Denny Davis. So come on, man. I mean, hey, I would look forward to Pat McAfee getting into the ring, and I love his promos and I love his commentary work. So I'm with you. He's the real deal.
I think it's great. It's a perfect marriage to bring him into the WWE. Definitely a good call by whoever made that call. You were right on. Let's get to the first match of the Hell in a Cell pay-per-view. It was inside a Hell in a Cell, and it was Bianca Belair retaining the SmackDown Women's Championship over Bayley. I'll get your thoughts first. What were your thoughts on this match and the direction of this story and that kind of thing?
I thought this match was pretty good. I mean, you had two very talented ladies in Bianca Belair and, of course, Bayley. I'm very happy for Bayley to get back into the picture because you don't have a Becky Lynch right now for obvious reasons. And you've got Charlotte and Rhea all on Raw, and we haven't seen Asuka in a couple weeks. So, and Banks has not been in there. So why not give Bayley the nod and get her in the picture? And I like the psychology. It was a good match. I'll tell you, the finisher was impressive, the KOD on the ladder, and to see Bianca in this environment was new for her. So that in itself, to me, was interesting. So my focus was on it. I mean, I didn't find myself kind of getting lost and getting away from it. So from that vantage point, it was good. But I'd be interested to get the host's opinion on it.
The host opinion, I've been very vocal on this podcast, and I've been been called out several times. Again, I'll flash it up on the screen. Send your hate tweets to @ChrisBelcher24. I don't care. I will respond. I am not a fan of Bianca Belair.
Okay.
I'm just not.
That's fair. Hey, that's honest. Yeah.
I don't know what it is. I don't know. She's very talented. She is uber athletic. You can't take that away from her. Even I can see that. Okay. Mm-hmm. I'm like I mentioned yesterday on the podcast about Raquel Gonzalez. I don't know what it is. I can't put my finger on it, but I'm just not behind Bianca Belair. So for that reason, I wasn't necessarily behind this match. In fact, I'll go as far as saying I don't think this match needed the Hell in a Cell. I think you could have saved the cell for Rhea and Charlotte, or for the next match that we're going to get to, and I'll bring this up again then, but I just don't think this match needed the cell.
Yeah, that's a very interesting observation. And hey, everybody's got their taste. I appreciate everybody, because it's like the argument with Omega. Is he overrated? You know, your favorite wrestler? That argument's been going on. So I'm sure I'll get hate tweets because I'll say something bad and not mean it that way. But, that's the wrestling community. We all, stay together until we get our feelings hurt, and we're all,
That's true. And then we're divided like the North and the South in the Civil War. Like
I know. It's like, what's going on? Yeah.
It's crazy. Wrestling fans are some of the most polarizing people in the world. There's no doubt about it. They are. But all that to say, I'm not going to take away from the match because what they did was good. You mentioned the KOD on the ladder. There were a couple of cool kendo stick spots. Those were cool.
They were.
I'm a fan of what they did in the ring. I'm just not a fan of Bianca Belair's character. It's just not ever resonated with me. But I'm like you. It was good to see Bayley be able to do her thing, be able to raise the stock of Bianca the way that she has in the absence of all the women that you mentioned. So kudos to them on that. Next match on the card is Seth Rollins and Cesaro. Seth finally getting the W over Cesaro. What a great match. This is what I was talking about. This match needed the Hell in a Cell.
Yeah, I could see these guys doing a Hell in a Cell. I mean, you got Cesaro, one of the strongest guys legitimately in WWE, probably pro wrestling. Of course, Seth Rollins, he's been the architect, the Beast Slayer, one of the greatest workers and one of the best for a reason. And these guys just have chemistry. You could see that from the WrestleMania match. And whether you like the story or not, the matches have been off the charts. I'm excited about what more they're going to tell on SmackDown between these two. But I'm with you. It could have used a gimmick, a Hell in a Cell, and they would have made it work.
And you mentioned, though, that they're great workers. So I'm sure that the idea was, they don't need it, so let's not give it to them. Well, the cell is supposed to be used for a personal rivalry, to settle the score, to be the blow-off. And if you're going to blow off Cesaro and Seth Rollins, put them in a cell. Let them just duke it out, because that's part of the story to me. But you're right. Seth Rollins, fantastic worker, one of the best of this reality era, whatever we're in. Definitely one of the best. Kingslayer, Beast Slayer, everything in between. The architect.
Yeah, take your pick. Yeah,
absolutely. And he and Cesaro are great friends outside the ring. So this whole story has been awesome to watch, because you can see that it's a friend helping a friend rise to the occasion and give him the credibility in the people's eyes and in the office eyes that he deserves.
Yeah, that's a great point, Chris. You mentioned it. I did not realize. See, I'm learning something all the time on your podcast, the Pipe Bomb Wrestling Podcast. Didn't know they were actually friends in real life. So that, to me, is always very interesting to know about. That makes sense, because they do perform very well at a high level. And they've got a great work ethic. You'll appreciate this reference. Shawn Michaels, Triple H. That's why their matches were so good. They're actually friends, but they were competitive. So they wanted to do their best and lay it all on the line. That's why those matches still hold up today as some of the best.
Absolutely. Some of my favorite matches of all time, Shawn Michaels and Triple H, two of my all-time favorites. Yeah. So I'm sure there will be people of this generation that will say two of their all-time favorites are Seth Rollins and Cesaro. They'll be able to look fondly on these matches in this era as well. One match that I don't look back too fondly on, and everybody that listens to this podcast knows that I'm a huge fan of Alexa Bliss, and I don't normally say negative things about Alexa Bliss. I just don't. I think everything she does is great. But I don't mind again, she defeated Shayna Baszler at the Hell in a Cell pay-per-view. I don't mind the storyline. A lot of people are saying, it's stupid. She's using a doll, blah, blah, blah. I don't hate it, because you look back, old school, you look back at guys like Papa Shango. You look back at people like that. So this has been all throughout wrestling. I don't mind the psychological manipulation of Alexa Bliss and that sort of thing. What I mind is that they're doing it to Shayna Baszler. That's not a person that they should do this to. I mean, you're looking at a woman who ran the gamut in the Elimination Chamber right before COVID, who was supposed to dethrone Becky Lynch, or, you would lead you to believe that. You have this dominant, she's one of the only two-time NXT women's champions. And it's bad enough for you to team her with Nia Jax, but now she's looking like an idiot in this Alexa Bliss storyline. I just don't like it from that perspective.
Yeah, I'm with you, because the way they booked Shayna, she came from the MMA world. She was so tough and credible. And Alexa Bliss, I kind of miss her old gimmicks, but I get it. Every gimmick needs to evolve and change, and she's been aligned with the Fiend so much. So what do people expect? I mean, I get they have their opinions like me and you do, but I don't know. I mean, I get the mind games, but maybe they overdo it a little bit instead of having an actual match. But I get the other side too, because the way she's presented, she's kind of playing this scarier character, similar to what Bray was doing with the Fiend. So it was definitely a different match. My expectations were kind of mixed. I didn't know what to make of it, but overall, it did surprise me that it wasn't terrible. It wasn't the greatest thing, but it was kind of in between.
Right. Well, let's jump to Monday Night Raw the next night. You see a Money in the Bank qualifying match where you have Nia Jax and Shayna Baszler team up and are defeated by Alexa Bliss and Nikki Cross. So you see more mind games again. But my issue with that, again, I don't normally say negative things about Alexa, but I don't think she needed to be in this match, because if you look at her gimmick and the way they've portrayed her, the last thing she needs to do is be aligned with somebody other than the Fiend. So to me, in my head, having her in a tag match and doing traditional things like Nikki Cross makes the hot tag, Alexa comes in and shoulder tackle, and she's doing the normal babyface comeback. That's not this character. She doesn't need to do that. So I had an issue with that as well as a follow-up to the match at Hell in a Cell.
Yeah, I mean, the psychology doesn't make sense. I mean,
right.
If we're being fair and want to be honest, I mean, it's not even old school, new school. It's just the facts of basic wrestling 101 fundamentals. Even fans can see that. And it's just, I don't get it. I mean, I'm happy for Nikki Cross. The hero gimmick, I think she came up with the idea from what I read on the internet. Not that you can believe everything, but I could probably buy maybe she had some input. But yeah, Alexa Bliss, yeah, I'm with you. I have to keep agreeing, man. That's scary, ain't it? We're agreeing so much.
To me, she's either, and we mentioned this, I think, a couple of weeks ago, that her absence in the women's division has been a huge, created a huge hole in the women's division because she was so dominant for so long. To me, she's either in or she's out. You can't be out one week and in the next week. You have to find a balance, and maybe they're working to try to do that, but I don't like her immediately going into a team with somebody who she's had no affiliation with in quite a long time. Now, that was her last tag team partner before she encountered the Fiend. I get that, but you got to have her align with somebody that's like-minded psychology-wise. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, because Nikki Cross, you mentioned that was a long time ago. I mean, she's been with Bray, so why are you trying to rekindle that? I think sometimes they honestly, with no fans, and I've heard maybe Vince is waiting for, and Stephanie's mentioned this, waiting for fans, and that's where we'll see the Fiend and Edge come back. But yeah, they're running out of kind of ideas, concepts. I hate to say that, but it seems they're just throwing ideas against the wall, seeing what sticks, and unfortunately they don't.
It's a good thing that fans are coming back in about 3 weeks, because
I know.
I agree.
That's going to be big. Yeah.
It's going to be huge. They kick it off with SmackDown and then Money in the Bank. Of course, the Buy Bomb Wrestling podcast will be going live after Money in the Bank. That is Sunday, July the 16th. We will give you a live recap, as we do after every pay-per-view and after every major event. We do that on YouTube. We do that on Twitch. So make sure you hit that subscribe button so you get a notification every time you get a new episode and every time we go live. Make sure you follow us on social media at PBW Podcast. That's where you'll find all the news about the podcast. Our new shows drop every Monday and every Thursday, so make sure you're checking us out. We go old school, new school, AEW, WWE, NXT, and everything in between. There is something for every wrestling fan here on the Pie Bomb Wrestling Podcast. I am your host, Chris Belcher, and joining me is my CCW tag team partner, commentary tag team partner, Mr. Tyler Peters. Happy that he has jumped on to talk about some WWE main roster. We're going through the results of Hell in a Cell right now, and the next match, man, Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens, another huge feud blown off at this pay-per-view. Let me tell you what stuck out to me in this match was Kevin Owens selling his injury from SmackDown before. Not only the throat injury, because he was coughing the whole match, but then when Sami Zayn hurt his shoulder, he sold that shoulder the rest of the match. Even when he went to kick out, he was holding his shoulder, and he had to put his whole body up to get his shoulder up. That's fantastic selling by Kevin Owens. Yeah,
Kevin Owens is so underrated at so many things, and that's a key element missing in wrestling today. Nobody's selling the injuries, even whether it's a big bump or a little bump. Sell it, make us believe, make us buy into it. And I agree with it. Kevin Owens KO is tremendous at that. What an effort! That's how you get the match over. That's another important aspect about it.
Yep. And then Kevin Owens also announced after the match that he's taking a little bit of a break from WWE. Could be storyline related. Could be he just needs a little R&R. I mean, the guy deserves it. He's arguably been one of the hardest workers in the pandemic era. He's been there the whole time. He's done everything. He had a long program with Roman Reigns and Jey Uso, and really helped solidify that Roman Reigns Universal Championship run. So kudos to Kevin Owens for being a hard worker. He deserves a little bit of a break. But Sami Zayn has been at the forefront of all this as well as far as storylines are concerned. He picks up the big win against Kevin Owens. What do you make of this controversial character with Sami Zayn and doing the documentary and all that kind of stuff?
Sami Zayn to me is an enigma. There's some things he does that I like, some things I don't. But I'll tell you, he has got to be one of the most talented guys, obviously, because pulling off all these different variations of his character. And I found myself laughing. I mean, whether I like it or not, he can get me to laugh. I mean, that takes skill in itself. And he's a tremendous wrestler, but he's kind of one of those guys. I'm either cold or hot on. I'm not sure, but I'll give it to him. I'll give him a lot of credit. He finds a way to pull it out of you, whether you necessarily agree with his creative or where he's coming from. So I'll be anxious to see. Yeah.
I completely agree. He is an enigma for sure. Either take him or leave him. That's definitely for sure. Somebody else that I think a lot of people can either take or leave, that there's no in between, is Charlotte Flair. And for us old school fans, especially my dad, shout out to my dad, who I know is listening, who is a big Ric Flair mark, is naturally gravitating towards Charlotte Flair. I don't do that. I'm not the biggest of Charlotte Flair fans. Again, much like Bianca Belair, Charlotte's athletic. She's got the look. She knows what she's doing. She's got the promo. She's got this. She's got that. Yada, yada. It's just lost on me. Like, I'm just not. I don't know. I feel like that she. I'll be careful how I say this. I feel like she has been pushed like Roman Reigns was pushed in 2014, 2015, 2016. And she's been rejected by people, but they don't care. Like, they're just going to, with Roman, you saw they kind of backed off of it and kind of restarted it, backed off of it and restarted it. With Charlotte, it's like, nope, no shame. We're just going to push her. And it's fine to have her in this match against Rhea Ripley, because I think the Charlotte Rhea story needs to be told, because we didn't get a chance to see anything after WrestleMania last year. So I agree with the spot that she's in the title picture. It's just me and Charlotte. I don't like it. What's your take?
Well, I'm actually going to have to disagree. I do like Charlotte.
It's fine.
But I know, Chris, I hate to disappoint you. But seriously, though, I think WWE just finds themselves in a dilemma, much like we were talking about with a lot of the women missing. I think with Rhea and Charlotte, it just works because we've seen how great their match was at WrestleMania back that year. And it just, that's the thing. That I go back to a formula, I think, that Vince is having to rely on. I mean, because Charlotte they pushed her so hard and so much to get on fans' nerves that she still is that star that they rely on. And then you've got this new star in Ripley, who, they're probably trying to find who's the other dance partner that we can pair with her. Well, Charlotte's looks like her only option. And like you say, there's still much of that story to be told. And I think that's really what it amounts to. It comes to with the creative behind Charlotte and Rhea.
Well, I mean, and that clearly points to the finish of that match at Hell in a Cell, where Rhea used the hood of the announce table to hit Charlotte and get herself disqualified. I'm okay with the finish, because, again, like you said, it advances the story. You knew you were going to get another match at Money in the Bank between these two. That's fine. That way you get a fresh opponent for one of them at SummerSlam. Okay, fine. I can get behind that. The thing that I have an issue with is that a disqualification was called because the hood of the announce table was used. I think that's the first time I've ever seen that be called a disqualification, because it gets used in like every other big time match and it is never called. So again, wrestling 101 psychology doesn't make any sense in my head.
They've had a lot of those finishes, even going on some Raws and SmackDowns, that kind of had me scratching my head. Like, I don't remember that watching, and maybe I'm going to NWA and old WWE with that, but I don't remember that being causing a disqualification. But I guess they're trying to change it up, be a little little creative there. So I don't
know. Like at least use a chair or something.
Yeah, make it mean something. Yeah, if you're just putting a hood of the commentary booth, we see that happen. Without being a disqualification. Exactly. I mean, even or do it afterwards.
Right, all the time. So use a chair. I tell you what, though, they use chairs, they use tables, they use kendo sticks. Of course, I'm talking about the main event inside Hell in a Cell, Drew McIntyre and Bobby Lashley. This was Drew's last shot at the WWE Championship as long as Bob is the champion. Well, sorry, Drew, Bob is still the champion. Bob comes out on top. What do you make of this? Are you good with Bobby's reign continuing here, or would you like to see them put the title back on Drew ahead of having the fans come in?
I'm actually happy that they're sticking with Bobby Lashley, and I'm a big fan of Drew McIntyre saying that, but I think I've heard the argument mentioned that they've we talked about stop and starting. They've done that with Drew, and probably by design, I'm sure, but they've he eliminated Brock Lesnar from the Rumble. He dominated the Beast at that WrestleMania from a couple years ago. And ever since it's switched to Orton and different people. And it's just, they haven't kept it on him. So to me, I just think at this point, you might as well keep it on Bobby Lashley, because for whatever reason, he's picking up more steam, as great as Drew is. And I'm really a big fan of the Scottish Warrior with MVP. I mean, that package, man, MVP's doing some of his greatest work, even without wrestling, just interfering and being a manager. I mean, I forgot how eloquent he is, articulate on his promos. They're outstanding.
Well, and I will say this too. I didn't follow him in Impact, but I think this is the best run of Bobby Lashley's career as well. And you got to give kudos, like you just mentioned, to MVP, and you got to give kudos to Drew McIntyre. I think the COVID era with no fans allows WWE the opportunity to explore things, i.e. the Roman Reigns heel turn that we're going to get to in a little bit. It gives them the opportunity to explore things without a lot of fallout. And I think Bobby Lashley is another result of exploring things, because with fans in attendance, I don't know that they would have had the guts, talking about WWE, to pull the trigger on Lashley being champion. I'm just not sure. Of course, they did it at WrestleMania. He retained the title, but I don't know. I don't know. I'm not saying I don't like Bobby Lashley or he's not good. I just don't know.
Yeah, but you're right. I mean, things change, and we've learned this. I mean, if you believe all the reports, which I know you can't, but I'm sure they go back and forth on stuff, because that's got to be tough, because Drew he was coming in after Rumble and dominating Lesnar. I shouldn't say dominating, but I mean, they looked that way, because Lesnar, he kicked out the F5s. I mean, that story they were telling, and then the kind of have him in a great rivalry with Orton. I was all for it, but then they switched it so much, and he just went back and forth. I think he just lost the steam out of his cells. I mean,
well, I think it's going to be a good thing when we get the fans back in. I do think Drew's going to get another crack at the title with the fans.
He will.
You got to give him that run in front of the crowd, because I know he was the first entrance at WrestleMania this year, but he got a really big pop, and I think the fans are still behind him. I don't think they've soured on him just yet. So I think he needs another run. But we'll have to wait and see, because on Monday Night Raw, he lost his Money in the Bank qualifying match to Riddle. I'm not a huge Riddle fan, but that match was really, really good. And then you have AJ and Ricochet pulling off the upset and going to the Money in the Bank match. And then you had Randy Orton and John Morrison, with John Morrison pulling off the upset. So those three guys are in the Money in the Bank ladder match. I will put over that wrestling like crazy. I'll get to that in a minute. But I find it interesting that we're heading into Money in the Bank, and you've got those three competitors who, again, I'm not going to take anything away from, in the Money in the Bank match. Now we find out next week on Monday Night Raw that we're going to have a last chance triple threat match between AJ, Orton, and Drew McIntyre. The winner will get into the Money in the Bank ladder match. What I'm having a hard time with is Money in the Bank is going to be the first pay-per-view with fans in a long time, aside from WrestleMania. I cannot imagine having the Money in the Bank, one of the focus matches of the pay-per-view, without two of those three top stars. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's hard to imagine because I mean, you got Styles, you got McIntyre, you just named it, Orton. I mean, that's going to be tough because I like that they're getting some different people involved, but you still got to have those big top main event stars as part of your card. So that's the thing. WWE's, I think they're fooling us all. Maybe I mean, I don't know. This is very talk about mind games. It's something, man. I don't know. It's interesting. He's like, all right, pal, I love it. Come on. I don't know. I have no idea. I respect him. He is crazy, but I respect,
Well, if you listen to Something to Wrestle with Bruce Pritchard, which is a fantastic podcast.
Oh, I love that show.
If you don't listen to it, those of you out there in listener land, if you don't listen to that show, you need to go listen to it. But Bruce Pritchard says all the time, be careful what you say around Vince McMahon, because he might take you seriously even when you're not being serious. And the next thing you know, it's going to end up on television. So.
Hey, yeah, Vince is like that. I've heard, man, like you say, Bruce mentioned it. He's very unique in that regard. I mean, he will literally, he's like, oh, this is the gimmick. This sounds good. And of course, Bruce, so speaking of impersonations, does a great Vince. I mean,
oh, yeah, he does.
He's awesome. Yeah.
He does the best Vince for sure. So next week on Monday Night Raw will be very interesting with that last chance triple threat match. But we saw this past week on Monday Night Raw, we finally get Eva Marie in the ring. And I have to bring this up because Eva Marie has been a hot button on this podcast. I know that some people, not named me, are not a fan of her being back. And I want to get your take because let me just tell you, as far as character goes, I'm not talking about wrestling ability. As far as character goes, I'm glad she's back because I think that her type of character is something that WWE is missing.
Yeah, it's reminiscent. Reminds you a lot of back, I think, when she was during the whole Divas deal.
Yep.
So, yeah, as far as character, I'm with you. But I was going to say maybe the turd sandwiches go to. But with saying that, though, I'm not going to go that harsh. I mean, just because it's Eva Marie. That was a good swerve. I did catch that last week with Piper Niven. I forget who they renamed her.
Dewdrop.
Yeah, I'm not sure what they're smoking there, but that was something. But yeah, that was cool because everybody was complaining, the whole wrestling community. We don't want to see Eva Marie. And hey, listen, I like those kind of swerves. It makes you think.
Well, and then too, the wrestling community, there were some, and again, if you're just now listening to this podcast for the first time, you will understand that I do not like some wrestling journalists with the last name that starts with an M and he lives in California.
I've heard of that guy. Yeah.
There are many wrestling journalists that I don't like. He's at the top of my list. And one of the main reasons he's at the top of my list is because he believes that everything he says is the gospel. Well, he came out and said not long ago that when Eva Marie came back, she was going to be a baby face and she was going to have this like model citizen character. And this is the new direction they're going to go with Eva Marie and yada, yada, yada. Well, guess what, Mr. M in California? You're wrong because that's not what they did. Drives me nuts, man.
The press is wrong there, buddy.
That's right. Don't believe everything you read online.
That's what kills me. And, I've even learned that, having to experiment with some writing, about different just opinions, because I want it to be more like that. Because, man, you find yourself getting in trouble from just taking certain people's word for it. Like, oh, this is the big story. This is how they got released or something like that. And I'm like, I really don't want to get drawn into that because you lose credibility, right. Really quick. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. You definitely do. And I can go on a rant about Mr. M in California, but we'll save that for another podcast. We talked about Monday Night Raw. Let's quickly talk about SmackDown because on SmackDown, we saw the Hell in a Cell match for the Universal Championship that was originally advertised for the pay-per-view. They moved it to SmackDown. Of course, I'm talking about Roman Reigns and Rey Mysterio, the big dog, the top dog, the tribal chief against one of the best of all time. Man, what a match those two put on in the main event of SmackDown. I was a huge fan, especially with it being the first ever Hell in a Cell match on SmackDown. And it's a really interesting ratings pool, but I was good with the move. What do you think of the match?
Well, I thought it was a great match. You got Roman Reigns taking on Rey Mysterio. Just the history with Rey fighting underneath against the bigger opponents, and no different with the tribal chief, the big dog. And we mentioned, Heyman is so crucial to all of this, being on the side, the head of the table, the Usos, and then you got Dominic Mysterio. So it's a whole family rivalry. So it makes everything much better, improved. And I thought it was a great match to talk about storytelling, very physical, intense, new weapons would be involved, Hell in a Cell. And I'm with you. I thought it was cool. The only thing that was a little bit disappointing, I kind of wished it was on Hell in a Cell, but I get it. They were trying to, once again, a swerve. Hey, we're going to do something different and put it on SmackDown. So, hey, good for them. I'm not going to complain that bad. I just, there's a part of me that kind of wish, could we not have it on Sunday's pay-per-view? Because I thought it might have helped. I mean, as much as I liked the Lashley McIntyre match, I was really all in for the Mysterio Reigns match. But hey, I enjoyed it. I'm glad it was on Friday night.
Well, we talked about on yesterday's episode about NXT, where SmackDown is kind of the number 2 show and Raw is kind of the number 3 show. So I can get where you would be more excited about Roman and Rey, especially with it being on the pay-per-view, because let's face it, Roman Reigns is the hottest story going in WWE right now on the main roster. So for him to not be on your pay-per-view, it can only help it. Like it couldn't have hurt it. It could have only helped it. Right. So overall, would you give that pay-per-view a thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs in the middle? Where were you at on Hell in a Cell?
I actually thought it was a good pay-per-view. I'm tempted to go thumbs up, actually, believe it or not. I would probably lean toward thumbs in the middle, but for what it was and how many matches they had, because I know they're shortening the pay-per-view format from what we're hearing, but I thought overall it was not a bad show. So I'm actually going to be positive and give it a thumbs up, believe it or not.
I'm going to say thumbs in the middle. And the only reason I'm going to say thumbs in the middle is because nothing really jumped out to me. Like it wasn't anything that was like, oh my gosh, I have to go back and watch this, So
yeah, that's fair. And that's what's great. Hey man, just the opinions. And I get that. I mean, I could see that where you're coming from.
Right. So before we sign off on today's bonus edition, Pipe Bomb Wrestling Podcast, I threw you the curveball yesterday, so you at least know it's coming today. We got to hand out our high spots and turd sandwiches, the highs and the lows of everything WWE main roster from Raw, SmackDown, and Hell in a Cell. I'm going to throw to you first and your turd sandwich first. You mentioned it earlier. If you want to go with it, I'm cool with that. If you want to switch it up, I'm cool with that too. What was your least favorite thing coming out of the main roster over the last couple of weeks?
The main roster, I got to tell you what, I'm not really, and this is going to sound bad because I know they're nice to look at, just being honest, but the whole Mandy Rose, Dana Brooke experiment has kind of, I don't know. I liked Mandy better with Sonya. But I understand, that feud was great. They had to separate them, and it's no disrespect. I think they've got talent, and of course the looks evidently, but sure. I don't know, that's something that's fell flat to me. It's really hard to think about. There's so much that's kind of iffy. That's one, I hate to pick on them, but if I had a choice, definitely was not a high spot. So it would be the other.
There you go. My turd sandwich of the week, you might disagree with this. The match was really good, but I hated the concept. I'm talking about Bobby Lashley versus Xavier Woods in Hell in a Cell on Monday Night Raw. Why? We mentioned earlier, Hell in a Cell is used for a blow-off. It's used for a big feud. It's used for a main event. It's used for the Hell in a Cell pay-per-view, not for a random match that somebody gets challenged on Monday Night Raw.
Do you think I
didn't like it.
Do you think they were just doing it because they did it on SmackDown? But it was overdone. I agree. But I think that's all it was. Hey, let's do it on Raw. I'm with you, but Sunday should have ended it.
100%. They were just doing it because it was on SmackDown. It has to be because it was terrible. The match was good, but I hated the concept of using the cell where it doesn't belong. I'm already, and again, this is another huge rant that I'm not going to go on. I already do not like the gimmick match pay-per-views. So like Hell in a Cell, Elimination Chamber, Extreme Rules, fill in the blank. I don't like that already. So then when you take it and you move it to the next night on Raw, not a fan. Don't like it. My high spot of the week, I mentioned it earlier, was actually the quality of wrestling on Monday Night Raw this past week. Those Money in the Bank qualifying matches, they were absolutely superb. And even like I said, Lashley and Woods was a good match. The storytelling with Eva Marie and then with Alexa Bliss and all that kind of stuff, again, that could be somewhat spotty, but overall, I'm going to give my high spot to Monday Night Raw this week. I was impressed, and I highly recommend people going back and watching it if they were sleeping on it. What's your high spot of this week? What was probably your favorite thing from the pay-per-view, Raw, and SmackDown?
SmackDown, I'm going to have to just give it to Reigns and Mysterio with all due respect to all the other card and matches on Friday night, just because you said it, Roman Reigns is one of the hottest things going as far as storylines and characters, and with Rey Mysterio, a legend. And the pay-per-view, I'm going to have to actually give that to Cesaro and Seth Rollins, and that's all due respect to all those matches. But as far as just quality, I mean, that's my high spot. And for Raw, that's a tough one too. All these are great questions. They're making me think. So
that's why I'm the phenomenal host.
I know that's why you're good. And where's the game show music and where's the game show network? That's what I'm looking for. But I'm with you. I guess go with the main event, Bobby Lashley and Kofi. Other than too many gimmicks, I'm with you. I'll just pick that one because and there was others, but
it was good stuff. It's really hard to like all of it. I'm not going to say it was all mediocre, but none of it was like bad, except for the stuff that we, kind of talked about already. If you're nitpicking, you can find bad stuff, but I'm with you on that. All right. Before we sign off, got to make sure that we let everybody know where you can find us. We are at PBW Podcast on all the major platforms, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can follow me at Chris Belcher 24. It's right there on your screen on Twitter and on Instagram. Make sure you follow the show. Make sure you subscribe to the show. That way you get a notification every time that a new episode drops, every time we go live. We do that after all the major events. We do that on YouTube and we do that on Twitch. Make sure you check us out there. Make sure you check us out at ProWrestlingTees.com/PBW podcast. And for goodness sakes, go to ProWrestlingTees.com/PBW podcast and buy a t-shirt. My goodness, please do that. Every Monday and every Thursday, we drop brand new episodes, new school, old school, AEW, NXT, WWE, and everything in between. We have something for all of our wrestling fans. My CCW broadcast partner, Tyler Peters, joining us for 2 straight episodes. Man, I can't thank you enough. It was a blast.
Oh, it was a lot of fun. And thank you, Chris, and to the Pipe Bomb Wrestling Podcast. This was just a joy and pleasure. And I love doing this. I'm a fan, too. So it's neat to go back and review what we liked, what we didn't. And just a thrill. I mean, I'm at a loss for words. I'm so honored. That's all I can say. That's my excuse for drawing a blank.
The show is for the fans, by the fans, and we're just a couple of wrestling fans. Make sure that you follow us both. Follow Tyler Peters at DustinTyler86 on Twitter. Again, you can follow me at Chris Belcher 24. The show is at PBW Podcast, and we are out of time, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us on the Pipe Bomb Wrestling Podcast. We will catch you guys on Monday for A&E Biographies Part 1. You don't want to miss. Myself, Jared, and our very special guest. Thanks for hanging out with us. We'll catch you guys down the road.